The vehicle came to upright. I'd been knocked unconscious in that instant about 2 or 3 times. My weapon rolled one way, an ammo tin rolled the other. Everything that was secure in the vehicle was suddenly ripped loose with the momentum. Blood was pouring down my face and I could feel the heat of it coming to my eye.
There is a large evidence base for psychological skills training in elite sport, in the healthcare industry, in clinical provision, in mental health services, in business. So it's translating that psychological skills training into the military. We're not using the terms mental health, mental well-being. Our currency is performance, because that's what recruits buy into at this stage. That's what they invested in, that's what they want to do, increase their performance. However, we know that if we get the buy-in, if we are kind of developing recruits' knowledge of themselves and the way their brain and body works and how to operate under stressful conditions, they are going to follow that through, you know, their life cycle.
If you wanted to look at historical context for the type of crisis that we're going through now, post-Iraq and Afghanistan, you'd have to look back to the American involvement in Vietnam, because much like Afghanistan and Iraq, it was a war that didn't really end well. Even though it was operational victory, you know, it was strategic failure, because every time that we engaged with the enemy, there was a massive weight of overwhelming firepower and superiority. However, perception in the public eye, perception from the veteran community, and just looking at the state of the country now makes you realise that there was no victory in either of those countries. 2010, Herrick 12 was probably the most arduous operational tour that I went on in Gereshk in Afghanistan. And I can't remember the exact figures, but I think it was about 14 personnel from the Mercian Regiment were killed during that 6-month summer tour. I knew all of them, either by face or, you know, knew them closely if I'd worked with them. And every time that you heard about someone dying, it was, you know, a big shock to the system. It was a big collective loss for us. But it wasn't just our unit, it was all the units that, you know, pretty much every 2 or 3 days you'd hear about someone being killed over the radio, and you'd be going back to Camp Bastion to do the repatriation and listening to the last post being played, which is always going to haunt anyone who's been in the military. So every Remembrance Day, when you hear that, it takes you straight back to, you know, standing on that dusty plain in Helmand. And it's kind of a hard one to process, because I realised that I was, you know, over in Afghanistan in a leadership role, and I'd already come to terms with why I was there and why we were there, because I didn't believe the official line of us being there to, you know, remove Al-Qaeda or help remove the Taliban. I just felt that we were there because we were the best people to bring ourselves back safely. I probably hadn't got the army out of my skin, and so when it all came crashing down, it was just a massive shock to the system. And now looking back, I realised that what happened to me was definitely stress related. There was more than likely, you know, some of the hypervigilance and the paranoia and the sort of heightened awareness that's associated with combat, but there was also a lot of stresses from personal life. Things that you wouldn't normally associate with being contributory factors for PTSD or, you know, some of a sort of mental health illness. I was in this sort of point of crisis, and I needed to sort of just escape from everything that was sort of holding me back in this negative situation. So I made some really difficult choices, and I ended up back in Manchester, where I grew up, sat in my house, no job, no wife, couldn't see my kids, and I'll get onto that in a minute. But I was really, really isolated, because throughout my military career, any time that anything had gone wrong in life, I knew that the moment I went back through that camp gate, I was at home, I was safe, I was with my family again. And so it didn't really matter what went on in the outside world, because we were different and separate and apart from civilians. But then when all of a sudden you become one again, and you're like, oh, I'm not used to this, I don't know how to select which bin to put out on a Tuesday, I don't know how to pay council tax or how to pay my TV licence, and all of these little, you know, details of normal life become insurmountable problems. You'd think that that would be the lowest point, the rock bottom, but it certainly wasn't, because one thing that I've realised since is that rock bottom keeps getting lower, and so you think that you've hit rock bottom, but then all of a sudden you crash through to another, you know, rock bottom, and so on, until you get to this point that you can take no more and you have to start that upwards climb again. So my career ended. It ended at the 10-year point in 2016, and yeah, as I say, it was massively cut short as far as I was concerned. But one of the biggest issues at that point was that I couldn't see the reality of the situation. I just felt it was that person's fault or that person's fault. Oh, it was that commander's fault because he'd, you know, affected my career negatively. But again, looking back with hindsight, none of it really mattered. It was just part of the journey that I was on, which many other veterans are on, and many serving soldiers are soon to go on, because this is what I've realised, that everyone has to take that journey of transition, and it doesn't matter whether you decide to leave at the 22-year point and you've got a future career planned out, or like me, your career's cut short. Ultimately, we all have to make that change from civilian to military and then back to civilian again, and it's how well we navigate that. Did I feel that the military prepared me for that transition? No. And don't get me wrong, when you're in the middle of that pain, all you want to be is somewhere else apart from there. But actually, when you look back on it, you realise how grateful you can be for the substance misuse and the financial insecurity and having to go to cash converters to sell DVDs just to buy some food. You know, and that sort of experience makes you so much stronger and so much more empathetic than if I hadn't had it. Part of finding a new life purpose is to let go of the past, let go of the military, not forget about it, because obviously, you know, we had some amazing times, we did some amazing things, we've got some amazing memories, but there's no point staying there in that limbo. You're not in the military, you're not out of the military, you're kind of somewhere stuck, and so in order to release yourself from that and move forward, you need to find a new reason for waking up in the morning, something that's going to get you out of bed. And yeah, that's, I think that the icing on the cake of recovery is when you find that reason to move forward. And what that does is it essentially replaces the military, because the military inspired us all with this sense of purpose. We had a common mission, we had a common goal. We woke up every morning knowing that we were doing something righteous and good in the world. So when that was taken away and we're sat back on our sofa in our hometown, then we don't have a sense of purpose, and that's when all of this decline in well-being occurs and the substance misuse or whatever it manifests as. If we did that intervention while still under the umbrella of the military, still earning a wage from the military, then it's going to prepare people for when they actually re-emerge back into civilian life. It's going to teach them about budgeting, it's going to prepare them with their CVs, interview techniques, it's going to have opportunities to try different career streams, all within that safety of the military bubble. And this is really, you know, a thank you for your service.
And then finally, to my left, we have the Right Honourable Tobias Ellwood, MP, and Minister of Defence for Personnel and Veterans.
A testament as to how we look after our armed forces personnel is how they transition into civilian life, and whether that transition is smooth, whether it's complicated, or indeed whether there are problems in adapting, and then being able to gain the necessary support that you require. So it's always concerning to hear stories such as Kirk's sharing, and it's important that we learn from them.